Hello folks, today we're going to be talking about all the non-Transcendence heroes that you need to know about for your account. We're going to be talking about all the different areas of the game and your progression through early, mid, late, and end game. So this will tell you all the heroes that you need to know that you should probably build on your account, and arguably it doesn't really matter which Transcendence heroes you have, these heroes will be relevant. Now before we get started, I need to make clear I'm not going to be discussing tenants. Heroes that are tenants will be unique to you and depend on who you decide to be your main homeowner hero. Instead, the heroes we discuss are heroes you will not use as tenants and not build as Transcendence heroes. They are instead heroes you will build to support your account in other ways. So hopefully you will find this useful, and hopefully it will give you some ideas for heroes that are not Transcendent that you can build to make your account stronger. Our discussion begins with early game. This is the stage of the game, arguably before you have a Transcendence hero or when you only have one. Your account will be limited with who it can use, and it's really important that you prioritize heroes that are going to give you a lot of power and a lot of coverage in the many game modes that are available to you. You need people that can do Aspen Dungeon, clear Tower of Oblivion, get campaign beaten so that you can unlock the Void campaign when you do get a Transcendence hero. You need someone who can grind through Realm's Gate reliably and generate you Stellar Shards and Crystals of Transcendence. All these important game modes in the Void and outside of the Void as well that generate resources are things you need to prioritize. So the heroes you will see here will of course play into those strategies. First things first is Eloise. She's the best early homeowner and arguably a compulsory pick for most new players. The reason we recommend her is that she does so much with so little investment. She's a hero who can go ahead and snowball very, very effectively, giving you a lot of bang for your buck. All you need is a base level Golden Crown. You will give her attack HP as her stone, and this will allow her to perform as optimally as possible. Simple build, really easy to get away with, and of course, it's a good idea to go ahead and build her tenants as well. By making her your first homeowner, even when you just have one Transcendence hero, she will do a lot for you, and really you don't move away from her until you get two Transcendence heroes. Next is Carrie, a hero a lot of people consider because she's a tenant for Eloise, but that is not the only strength. I feel Carrie can be useful even if you didn't choose Eloise as your main homeowner. The reason Carrie is good is she steals energy from opponents and she resurrects after she dies. This means she has continuous impact in fights because that resurrection allows her to continue to be good even after she's died. As well, she's able to go ahead and dodge attacks, which means she has increased survivability for herself, and her energy steal that we mentioned is really, really strong against problematic opponents such as Garuda. Garuda pops up all the time in campaign and as well in the Realm's Gate and in the Void Vortex, so having a hero that can counter her is very, very useful. And that's why Carrie makes it onto this list, because she's one of the best counters to a lot of the problematic heroes in the game and arguably the most effective dark hero to invest in early. Building her is relatively easy. It arguably doesn't really matter what stone she has because she will just resurrect anyway. Attack is always good if you intend on her being a tenant. Attack HP is well rounded, or anything with speed can be helpful as well. So Carrie should also be given an energy artifact, as that allows her to get an early active skill, mark opponents, and steal their energy. With all that put together, it shouldn't be too hard to build a good Carrie. In fact, you can just go ahead and use a magic source. It doesn't have to be a fancy artifact like Melodic Strings. Provided you do all that, Carrie will serve you well. And finally, for early game heroes that you should consider building to E5, we have a Tix. Tix is super reliable, able to clear Aspen Dungeon, and has one of the most effective active skills in the game. Not only does he do a lot of burst damage to opponents, he's able to deal CC to them, silencing or horrifying them, and on top of that, he's able to steal their attack. That attack steal is crucial against really powerful opponents because it shuts them down and lets you go ahead and survive against their attacks. That's great for Broken Spaces and the Void Vortex and Realm's Gate alike. As well, that crowd control, the silence, the horrify, it really helps to shut down opponents, and the damage is of course brilliant. Tix also, when he dies, has a passive that allows him to mark the person who killed him, and if you do kill that hero, it deals a ton of damage to the opponents, so he's even effective after death, just like Carrie. This makes Tix a really effective hero, not just because he's able to do all that damage, but because of his Aspen Dungeon clears as well, Tower of Oblivion pushes, and actually in campaign, because he's a burst hero, he's able to deal with a lot of waves people struggle with, because giving him energy feed, such as from a Melodic Strings, allows him to do an early active, then you can use an Ignis to die, energy feed him, and then of course that allows him to pop off again. So Tix is a crucial hero to build, even if you choose not to use Eloise. I know he is a tenant for Eloise, that is a strength for her indeed, but actually you'll find that the reason Eloise is so good is not just because she's a powerful hero, but because Carrie and Tix are just really useful heroes on their own, that actually the fact they're tenants is just even a bonus. So yeah, there you go. Tix is a fantastic hero to consider. Now, if you want to build him effectively, you can go with a crit build, making him crit attack with melodic strings. That's good for burst. Or you can go with something a little more well-rounded, such as attack HP. That will just give him good stats. You should find with a crit attack build and a melodic strings, he's able to easily clear Aspen Dungeon if you know when to use your demon potions. The attack bonus and holy damage bonus from melodic strings is fantastic. And yeah, that build should burst through a lot of game modes and help you out significantly. In the early game, those 3 heroes are ones you should consider building to E5, but there are also heroes you can build to 9-star to support you in the early game as well. The reason we do this is 9-star is a significantly reduced investment, but when a hero is 9-star, they unlock the full power of their final passive. Passive skills are fantastic, trigger typically when a hero is killed, and when they die, that means they can go ahead and buff your team with that passive, and therefore you didn't need much to get them to do good on your account. One example of this is Ignis. When she dies, she's able to fully heal the person she's next to and give them 100% control immunity. Control immunity is crucial for a lot of heroes because it means they can still do something if your opponent is trying to lock them down. If you do not have control immunity, heroes like Oberon or heroes that can freeze, stun, or petrify will ruin your day, and therefore Ignis is crucial if you know who to put her next to. As well, the energy that she feeds is crucial for dealing lots of damage. Like I mentioned earlier with Tix, a common way to deal with problematic levels in campaign is to get Tix to do an active skill, let Ignis die next to him, give him full energy, and then in round 2 he'll do an active skill as well. This gives him a lot of reliable burst and crowd control, so it's good to go ahead and build an Ignis for both of those reasons. Another hero with a phenomenal 9-star passive is Waldeck. This passive gives Blood Frenzy to your allies, and Blood Frenzy bleeds opponents, and if an opponent is bleeding, when they hit your team with Blood Frenzy, they gain attack and they heal. This is a great way to buff your team, mitigate damage, and give yourself some much needed protection. So all in all, this is a very, very solid ability and makes Waldeck a fantastic hero to throw on an account. Also, Blood Frenzy here is granted to all allies. This is brilliant. This means that all he has to do is die, give it to the rest of your team, and they will get a lot of bonuses. Also, you will find that getting hit a lot and the scaling that comes from that, it's a significant amount of attack. It's 12% each time you get hit. So actually, whoever's on your front line, ideally an Eloise, is going to get tons and tons of stacks off this and get a lot of healing, a lot of damage, and hopefully tear through the wave. Waldeck is absolutely a hero to consider building to 9-star because he is such a reliable support. Unlike the last two, Drake is a 9-star that you build to live. Waldeck wants to die, Ignis wants to die, so it really doesn't matter how you build them. But in the case of Drake, Drake is fantastic with his defense down ability. This targets the lowest HP opponent and removes all of their defenses. This is a great way to deal with boss fights, such as broken spaces, because ideally you can keep your team alive by stealing your opponent's attack with someone like Tix, and then Drake can live. You can give him healing as well if it's needed, and ideally some protective artifacts, maybe like a Plate of Courageous or a spare golden crown if you have one, and by allowing your Drake to live, he's going to put defense down on that opponent, and that shreds through all of their protection. In things like broken spaces, those opponents actually have a lot of armor and a lot of damage reduction, so by removing all that, you're able to do maximum damage to your opponent, and it really adds up. When Drake was added to the game, people were shocked how much damage they were able to do with bosses thanks to this ability. Defense down is something you should really consider. However, I would recommend building Carry first and then going to the Glory Challenge and getting those 2 6-star Dark Heroes you get for building a 10-star Dark Hero. So by building Carry to 10-star, you'll get the 2 6-star foods you need to make your Drake a 9-star hero. So that's another little trick you can do when building him. Finally, for a similar reason to Drake, I recommend Heartwatcher. Heartwatcher, again, only really needs to be built to 9 or maybe 10-star, and provided you can keep the Heartwatcher alive, her buffs will be fantastic. The main reason people like Heartwatcher is she's able to steal your opponent's attacks, so gives more survivability like Tix does, but also she inflicts Watcher marks to your opponent. These are marks that increase the damage an opponent takes up to 300%, so if you can put enough Watcher marks out, they are permanent and will eventually allow you to do 4 times more damage than usual against that opponent. Again, in boss fights where the rounds last for quite some time and the opponent is just a massive meat bag, you want to do as much damage as possible. So combining this Watcher mark with the defense down from Drake, it allows a lot of your heroes to do way more damage than they normally would. So that 4 times extra damage compounded with the stripped defenses that Drake has really adds up for a massive amount of damage from your team, simply by using 2 9-star heroes. So there are my early game recommendations, both for E5s and 9-star heroes. Hopefully some of those heroes have been informative for you and you've added them to your account. Let's go ahead and look at mid-game heroes now. For those of you that have maybe 2 or 3 Transcendence heroes and are beginning to transition away from an account using Eloise and are looking for something more focused on an actual team using a Transcendence hero as a main homeowner. The first major hero to consider is Rogan. Whether you use assassins or not, Rogan is phenomenal. His passive, Warpath Roar, is able to improve the speed and crit damage of your heroes in round 1, and in each following round, he's able to go ahead and improve your attack and crit. This is phenomenal, especially when you use 2 Rogans, because that's going to stockpile on top of itself, and actually if you have assassins on your team, such as a Sword Flash, that bonus gets doubled. So in theory, by using 2 Rogans, both with Warpath Roar, even if they're just E5, you'll get an additional 80% crit damage. If you go on ahead and improve his Tree of Origin, that goes up to 25% crit damage and therefore can become 100% crit damage for that Sword Flash in round 1 just by using 2 Void 3 Rogans. It's a nice little trick people like to do to go ahead and improve the power of your team. But this still works with other heroes like Mockman or any other major damage dealer who is focusing on bursting. It doesn't work so well with someone like Eloise because crit damage isn't as impactful there, and actually you'll find that someone like Waldeck gives more attack over time. That's not to say that 20% attack from Warpath War is bad, it just doesn't hit the same as something like Blood Frenzy would. That said though, if you're looking for someone who deals a lot of burst damage and ideally is given a melodic strings in round 1 to go ahead and burst through and then gets energy fed for a second active skill, similar to what we said for Tix, that strategy works for Sword Flash, it works for Mockman, and these Transcendence heroes really enjoy a Rogan being on your team. As well, Rogan's active skill gives Bloodthirsty, which allows allies to be healed by their own skills and also deal more damage. So giving Bloodthirsty to 2 random allies is super duper useful. Now, if you want to take advantage of that Bloodthirsty ability, it makes sense to give him an energy artifact. But if you find that your Rogan is dying, you can still build him defensively. That means when it comes to his stone, you arguably want to build him speed HP if he needs to be quick, or HP just to live. If he's a tenant, attack HP is also recommended, or even attack for maximum damage. Energy, as I said, works great for getting that active skill off, but if you need to build him more defensively, consider Plate of Courageous or a Golden Crown to allow him to survive. Next for mid-game, we have Ignis, and this doesn't mean building her for suicide this time. We need this Ignis to be 10-star or above, or even E5. The main reason is her active skill gives 100 energy to the person she's next to. This ability to energy feed your major damage dealer is really, really important. You ideally give them a melodic strings to get an active skill round 1, Ignis then energy feeds them, they get an active skill in round 2 as well. That applies a lot of pressure to opponents. But if you make an Ignis E5, she's able to survive, and that means she can go ahead and keep energy feeding. Very, very helpful. In things like Star Expedition, you can put an Ignis next to someone like a Fairy Queen Vesa, and this allows Ignis to energy feed Vesa, giving her active skills reliably, because Star Expedition actually can steal your energy and prevent you from doing attacks. So actually by having an Ignis with a Vesa, you are giving your team an access to more active skills, which of course allows for more damage from your Fairy Queen Vesa, or even your Sword Flash if that's the damage dealer you choose to use in Star Expedition. So yeah, that's a really good way of getting maximum damage in boss fights, energy feeding with an Ignis. This is a strategy that will work very reliably deeper in as well. Even in something like Abyss Seal Land, you want to have energy feed from an Ignis to your damage dealer, whoever that may be. So I highly recommend building an E5 Ignis once you reach that mid-game, because the energy feed is super duper reliable and will continue to be for quite some time. So don't sleep on this. A lot of people think Ignis is a hero you just want for that final passive, but the active skill is really good as well. Some people like to have still a 9-star Ignis and then an E5 separately. That's so that you can have one for doing the death passive, the other one for doing the active skill. One to live, one to die. For keeping an Ignis alive, it's really simple. All you want to do is go ahead and give her either an energy artifact for the energy feed, or if you need to keep her really tanky, you can go with a Golden Crown and HP. Typically the stone on an Ignis, if you need her to live, will always be HP. The more health, the better. Finally, for mid-game, it's probably worth considering making that 9-star Drake you built to E5. That's because by having him stay alive on your team, it's a very reliable way to keep up damage. Having defense down reliably put onto an opponent is really helpful, so the longer he can live, the better. At E5, he gains Unbending Will, you can give him a lot more health, and of course, by giving him health, Unbending Will, he's going to live a lot more reliably. So if you ever feel like you need to put Drake on a team and you need him to survive more, it's always a good idea to build him to E5. This is especially true if you build someone like Sword Flash, because his defense down ability synergizes fantastically, because Sword Flash wants to kill the lowest HP opponent in round 1, and also she typically targets lowest HP opponents anyway, so the longer Drake can live, the better. You don't have to make him to E5, but he is definitely a highly impactful choice, and that continues to be true even in Broken Spaces, up into Broken Spaces 8 and Broken Spaces 9, where survival is rather tricky. Again, you probably want to consider building him for HP, and Golden Crown or Plate of Courageous. Typically, that'll be true for most of the support heroes here. Keeping them alive is really important. If you can get away with it, though, it's always worth considering putting Demon Bells on these heroes as well to give energy feed to your team. But there's never like a really damaging artifact you'll need further ahead to this, because really these heroes are here to support, not to deal damage. Once you've got those heroes in and you've got that solid Transcendence team beginning to be built, hopefully things are looking good. You've got your tenants sorted, you've got those Transcendence heroes, and you've began building some support heroes that you don't need as tenants, but they're going to be working very nice to help you get more damage. So what else do we need? When you begin to transition to late game, you've got 4 or 5 Transcendence heroes, you're starting to think about the future of your account. Maybe you're really questioning how you can min-max your performance in game modes, and things like Realms Gate are starting to get really hard. Puppets are becoming a problem, and you want to push as high as you can in Realms Gate 100+. So let's go look at some other heroes that can help you there. For late game, a really impactful hero is Olivia. Olivia is slept on quite a bit, but she has one of the best skill effects in the game, Shrink. Shrink is able to reduce the damage a target does to you, but also increases the damage they receive by quite a significant amount. Also, the effect of her Shrink is more powerful the higher you get her Void imprints, so Void 2, as you can see here, allows you to deal 40% extra damage, and the damage the opponent will deal who is shrunk is reduced by a whopping 60%. This is a crippling ability that shuts down an opponent really reliably, and is really helpful in things like Forest Seal Land if you're trying to push with a Versa. Not only that, it can really add to your survivability in something like Star Expedition and allow you to deal with higher end opponents who will typically destroy your team very quickly. As well, against puppets, she's really reliable because the Shrink adds to your survival, but she also has an ability called Fairy's Guard that adds to your protection. The protection it offers is an attack that deals damage back to the opponent, but also heals you when you take a hit as well. So it's a nice way of keeping pressure on the opponent whilst also healing your team. Combining the healing from Fairy's Guard with the reduction of damage from Shrink, you really do see a massive improvement in your team. And especially in opponents of Broken Spaces 8 and Broken Spaces 9, this ability is super strong because the Shrink reduces the damage and allows you to deal even more damage to those opponents, killing them quicker, and of course using less attempts. On top of that, Olivia, as I said, is good in puppets, but it's also good in Force War. Allowing to have your team with more survival, giving those heroes you have protection, is crucial to succeeding in these game modes. So Olivia allows you to really push and keep your team alive when opponents are starting to get very problematic. As all we are after are her abilities, of course build her HP, and keep her alive with things like Golden Crown or Fearless Armor, and again, you can give her Demon Bells to energy feed if her survival is fine. For similar reasons to Olivia, we find Amun-Ra on this list as well. Amun-Ra offers slightly different abilities, but is also just as good for keeping you alive. First of all, she has Guardian Shadow, a bubble that protects you by allowing you to take no damage from the next hit you take, and instead it turns that hit into healing. This is phenomenal, as you can totally shut down a lot of burst damage done by opponents. Great way to keep your team alive against nasty opponents who deal single target crit damage, because it just turns that one big hit into no damage at all and allows you to heal. So that's really strong. This allows you to push really far in Dark Seal Land, but more importantly is super good against puppets in the Realms Gate, because those puppets will wreck you really hard if you're not careful, and the bubbles will of course keep you alive. As well, Amun-Ra is really useful in Force War. The opponents can be quite annoying in the different lair fights you have, so of course by using an Amun-Ra you can keep yourself alive and allow yourself to get through, because when you start upgrading the power of Force War opponents, you'll notice they will try to tear through you. So Olivia and Amun-Ra are both good for giving you much needed protection. On top of that, Amun-Ra is able to CC opponents with Petrify if they're on the front line, and she offers one of the most horrid abilities in the game called Healing Curse. Healing Curse is able to turn any healing an opponent takes into damage. So if you're against a problematic healer, it will turn their annoying healing into damage against themselves. A very strong ability that should not be slept on. This can one-shot a Sword Flash, as Sword Flash does a massive heal to herself, and also can turn any Ignis healing, which would be 100% of max health, into 100% of dead. So yeah, really strong ability. It means also if you're facing Amun-Ra's, you should respect the Healing Curse, because normally that's something that's going to wreck you. This is a mark, so can be removed by Mark Purify, but typically opponents are going to really struggle against that. You just need to be aware of it if you ever fight an Amun-Ra yourself. So yeah, Amun-Ra, a really good hero to build, and of course, like most of the support heroes here, build her HP or speed HP, and typically you want to give her something to keep her alive, such as a Golden Crown. Although you can give her an energy artifact because those bubbles are super reliable, and if you find she's dying anyway, just getting those off quickly can be really crucial to keeping your team alive. And finally for late game, she's back! Ignis, but in this case, it's building even more 9-star Ignises. Basically, you'll get to a point in the game where you at some points want to just have 3 9-star Ignises on your team so they can give all the other 3 heroes control immunity. There's one particular puppet in Realm's Gate that's really problematic because they can crowd control you, and by giving your 3 main heroes 3 Ignises next to them to go ahead and give them all control immunity can pretty much turn the fight to be a complete win for you, because the main thing that kills you is the control. If your team can live, you can eventually snowball, kill them, and you should be able to beat that puppet no problem. A nice little trick for dealing with problematic opponents. Also, in things like Tower of Oblivion and Trial of the Champions, if you're ever fighting anything that's full of CC, or just need a hero to throw in, or even if it's Interdimensional Arena or Guild Wars or just something to pad out a team, 9-star Ignises are really good to put against your big powerful heroes, because when they die, they give you control immunity and healing. A really strong ability, and control immunity just can win fights straight up, because a lot of teams rely on control to beat you. So by shutting that down, you can just rely on raw damage, and it allows your damage dealers to pop off. So yeah, if you're at late game and you can't come up with anyone else to build, more Ignises at 9-star is never an issue. And finally, we move on to end game. This is when you have 6+ Transcendence Heroes. You don't really know who to build. Your team is just absolutely stacked. You've got one massive major homeowner, typically with level 105 houses, and that hero is just damaging and killing absolutely everything. End game as well is when you start putting Tree of Origin improvements on tenants just to get more power on your main damage dealer, and it's at that point your account is completely stacked. So what can we add to an account like that to really min-max your progress? Well, you want to consider really high-rolly heroes like Gurk. Gurk is bizarre because typically he's been really bad, but ever since he was given Void Imprints and the ability to be approved in the Tree of Origin, Gurk has had one interesting niche, and that's the fact that his active skill gives holy damage to 3 people on your team and doesn't have a cap. That means that holy damage bonus lasts for the entire fight. By having a Gurk with reliable energy feed so that you can give him an active skill every round, he is going to be continuously increasing the holy damage of your team, so the longer the fight goes on, the more powerful your heroes get. Granted, it's 3 random allies, so probably only a 50% chance of hitting your major damage dealer, but it will add up significantly. This can really add to damage in Star Expedition, can be really funny in Flame Shrine, and can give you tons of damage in Broken Spaces. Not that those game modes are tricky for people at endgame, but it is a really fun way to maximize your damage. So if you want to have a bit of fun, really get those damage numbers out the sky, then yeah, go ahead and build yourself a Gurk. Typically, you'll build him HP, so he lives. The only thing you care about is his skill. Even give him a golden crown so that he can survive, or maybe a gilded purple fan. And the key thing here is that you can energy feed him with a team full of demon bells, so that of course he's able to do active skills every round. You might even want him to be one of the heroes carrying a demon bell. That's fine too. And the final hero for endgame is a hero that is only ever good when he is as strong as the rest of your team. Once you have pushed to the absolute maximum limit of the power of your team, and you can go ahead and build 2 of this guy to probably Tree of Origin 5 so that he can live, then yeah, go ahead and consider a Seahu. Seahu is a super duper whale endgamey hero to use because he's very difficult to pull off, but typically if you can get a Seahu to live, then your team will really benefit from it. What makes Seahu good is that whenever an ally blocks, he gains a stack. 6 blocks in total will trigger his passive, which increases all allies' attack by 20% and their armor by 20% for 3 rounds. Now, if your opponents are applying a lot of pressure to your team, you've maybe got 6 opponents there that you're fighting, and they attack you continuously, that could be a lot of blocks for your team if you have a block star spawn, for example, and have block imprints on your Transcendence heroes. Enough blocking can really cause your team to snowball out of control, gaining a ton of armor and a ton of attack, and eventually the team will be really difficult for your opponent to deal with. You don't even need energy feed for this to work. You can build a whole team with Gilded Purple Fans, Augustus Magic Balls, Golden Crowns, anything that allows you to live, and that team will just snowball and snowball and snowball through survival, and this is the ultimate sustain strategy for endgame. It can be crucial for dealing with some opponents and give you wins in game modes you otherwise wouldn't be able to, but it is very difficult to pull off because, as I said, those Seahus need to live, and giving a Seahu the resources to survive is quite tricky, especially when really, if you want to get the most out of this, you need 2 Seahus, because then the scaling really gets out of control. And actually, if you see, this scaling goes all the way up when you Void Imprint him. It's going to be attack 25% and armor 25%. So yeah, a really powerful hero if you can pull it off, but of course it's going to be difficult for anyone that isn't in endgame to allow a Seahu to survive. But if you are in that position, go ahead and consider getting 2 of them. It can really transform your account. And that's it. That's the list of pretty much all the non-Transcendence heroes worth considering that aren't tenants that will go ahead and benefit your account by supporting your main Transcendence heroes to do their best. This is also a guide for who to keep around because those heroes are really useful, and having copies of them to build them to E5 or 9-star can be very useful. Hopefully you learned something today. Let me know which heroes you like that aren't Transcendent in the comment section, and I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, and of course, happy idling.